Now I'd like to welcome to the show Alfredo Ortiz, President and CEO of the Job Creators Network. He's the author of the very recently published book, The Real Race Revolutionaries: How Minority Entrepreneurship Can Overcome America's Racial and Economic Divides. Welcome, Alfredo.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Now, first, can you just tell us about the Job Creators Network itself and what your major goals are?
Yeah, it's a great organization. It was founded just over 10 years ago by one of the greatest entrepreneurs that I believe lives today, which is Bernie Marcus, the founder of Home Depot. It's a great story. Actually, in his foreword, he talks about that story himself. He was fired at 49, and at 52, he started Home Depot with this great vision, great idea. And today, like I said, he's probably one of the greatest entrepreneurs and philanthropists out there. But he had this idea that if he tried to start Home Depot under the environment that existed back then under Obama, with high regulations and high taxes, it would have been impossible for him to start Home Depot. And so the idea of JCN, of Job Creators Network, is to really try to push for small business owner success through lower taxes and less regulations.
That's great. Now, to get into the book, questions of economic fairness and racial and ethnic politics are pretty controversial and divisive these days. What made you want to wade into this battleground with a book of your own?
Yeah, well, the biggest reason was I gave a testimony before the full House Ways and Means Committee last spring. I was the sole Republican witness at that hearing, and they were pushing this idea. The Democrats were pushing the idea of that the systemic racism exists in this country, and that the only way that can be addressed is through more government intervention. And I actually countered the opposite, which is basically that we actually need less government intervention, and we need an opportunity for entrepreneurs to flourish and succeed, because I basically said that entrepreneurialism is actually the real solution to try to break that racial and economic divide. I myself, by the way, am an example of that. I grew up poor in Chula Vista, California. I went around on trash day with my mom, collecting aluminum cans and newspapers, and would run over to the YMCA, collect, and that was our grocery money for the week. And so I was the first one to finish high school, for example, college, grad school. But I owned two of my small businesses over the past 15 years of my life that, quite frankly, set me on a wonderful course that I am today, where I was actually able to stand next to the President of the United States, for example, as a commissioner on the White House Excellence for Education for Hispanics. And so only in this country. But how does that happen? It wasn't through government intervention. It was through hard work and grit and determination and a belief in God and a belief in, quite frankly, all the people around me that helped support me.
Excellent. Now, we've seen a lot of self-proclaimed economic justice advocates these days claiming to speak for various minority communities. Why is it that so many people in the news media and public life seem to be listening to people like Black Lives Matter activists that brag about being trained Marxists, rather than Black intellectuals like Thomas Sowell or Shelby Steele or Glenn Lowry?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And actually, talk a little bit about the whole debate between Du Bois back then and Booker Washington. In terms of who Du Bois, as became one of the leading voices in the socialist movement in this country, and Washington really pushing for entrepreneurialism and education for Black people to be able to advance, and actually bridge some of that racial and economic divide. And so, unfortunately, I think what happens now and what's happening today is that voices, for example, like mine, we can get shut down pretty quickly. Now, frankly, I don't really care if I try to get shut down. And, we've been canceled on Twitter a few times and Facebook a few times. And, when we were challenging things like, the vaccine mandate and whatnot. But a lot of times these comments, as you said, are so intensely received by the progressives on the left, that this cancel culture really keeps people from expressing their points of view. I will tell you that over the 10 years that I've been running this organization, Job Creators Network, I have run into countless countless entrepreneurs, the majority of which are minority entrepreneurs. And we're talking Black, Lebanese, Asian, Hispanic. I mean, you name it. But they believe that this idea of entrepreneurialism, right, of actually reducing taxes, reducing regulations, and improving their ability to have more successful businesses and small businesses is really the answer for that. But they are afraid of expressing that because of this cancel culture. And look, I mean, the media from the left, they control 90% of the media messages that are out there. And so it really is hard for this message to get through, which is, again, why I wrote this book, to try to actually push this narrative out there and maybe at least get the conversation going.
That's great. A lot of people in the business world, including some of our most successful entrepreneurs, tend to stick to their business interests and avoid political debates, unlike someone like Bernie Marcus, who's sort of in both worlds. Does that leave us at a disadvantage, people who are defending free markets, when it comes to the socialist side of the spectrum, where the most aggressive pro-socialists are full-time activists who do nothing but that?
It really does, unfortunately. And so, I think I might mention I was a commissioner under Trump for the White House Education Excellence for Hispanics program. A real honor, right? And Bob Unanue, who was the CEO of Goya Foods, was a commissioner alongside with me. Look what happened to him. The boycott that actually happened, which actually had negative ramifications and actually backfired on the left. It actually did great. And it became this boycott, right, for Goya Foods. But think about that story of Goya Foods. I mean, entrepreneurs coming over here, success story, Hispanics. I mean, yet the left, they don't even care. The fact that it had a counter narrative to what they think is the right answer, right? They try to destroy him. They try to destroy the company, and they weren't actually successful in that. And thank goodness, because Bob, for example, and his family have done an amazing job, and they are an amazing contributor back to the community and the Hispanic community. And so, but again, in this cancel culture, people are afraid to speak out because they might just get their business hurt. And so it's really hard, but I encourage small business owners. We have what's called small business advocates. We have about 50, 60 of them that are just brave souls that say, you know what, I might get hurt, my business might suffer, but this is the right thing to do, to speak out. We're looking for those people, a few good men and women entrepreneurs that are willing to take that and get this message out there.
Yeah, and I guess, as you pointed out with the Goya Foods sort of counter boycott, even if people do upset some people, there's likely in a lot of communities to be people on the other side who will support them for speaking out for freedom.
Yep, exactly.
So on kind of a similar angle, here's something that I've been thinking about ever since I read this book last year by the economist Richard Salzman. So he's a finance guy. He's also a professor at Duke. And he has a compelling question in his most recent book. He writes that when a person believes in the ideas of socialism, we call that person a socialist. But when someone believes in the ideas of capitalism, we rarely call that person a capitalist unless they own their own business themselves. So shouldn't most Americans actually consider themselves capitalists, even if they get wage and salary income instead of being a CEO?
That's a great point. I mean, I think part of the problem is that over the years, socialism has kind of, I don't know, gotten this romantic idea of what socialism really is. And I think, our millennials have this complete misunderstanding. And quite frankly, I almost give credit to the socialists and Democrats that have actually been able to redefine what socialism really is and have actually given capitalism a bad name. I've always said that the Republicans and the conservatives actually did themselves a disfavor by actually walking away from that word and say, don't say that, say something else, but not capitalism, because that's a bad word, right? They actually gave in and pretty much put the white flag on challenging that. We really should have been embracing that word capitalism and showing why that actually is a good thing, right? Socialism, we know, takes, but capitalism creates. And that's throughout the whole country. Why are people coming here, for example, immigrants fleeing Nicaragua, for example, or Venezuela, coming here with many times nothing other than their name, right? And create a wonderful life for themselves here, because they know that the opportunity is here, that this country provides that opportunity, where with hard work and grit, determination, and belief in yourself, you can really achieve that American dream. And so, the one thing that I think is really tough too is this whole idea of equality of outcome, right? This country always promised equality and opportunity, but never an equality of outcome. And so I think it's actually something that immigrants that are coming here to the United States understand that. I haven't talked to one single one of our members across the 10 years that believe, hey, you know what? Just because I'm an immigrant, I should actually have an equal outcome to a Bernie Marcus, right? I mean, they know that it's hard work and grit that gets us to where we are today.
And that kind of leads me into my next question, which is the irony that what we've seen many times in the United States, which is that immigrants who come to the U.S. who come from communist or totalitarian countries are the most hardcore, ironclad anti-communists you'll ever meet in your life. Yet American college students who grew up in upper middle class environments are the ones who seem to think that it's trendy and cool to be a Marxist. What does that tell us a little something about the two respective systems?
Yeah, it really does. Unfortunately, it tells us a lot too about our college campuses and who's educating the youth of today in the belief that capitalism is bad. I mean, if you look, as you know, across the globe, capitalism has actually been what's really pulled people out of poverty. And again, nobody's defended the word capitalism, so it sounds like a bad word. Oh, you're a capitalist, right? That's actually great. I'm glad I'm a capitalist. I'm glad I'm an entrepreneur. I'm glad that you're calling me somebody who says that, hey, if I work really hard and I have a dream and a vision, I might make something of myself, right? And so instead, we're embracing this idea of reparations, of government. Government really is the only solution. And in fact, going back to my testimony, again, one of the reasons why I wrote this book, because it really gnawed on me for several months after I gave that, thinking this actually was a very insulting thing for the Democrats to be telling me, that I was ignorant and inappropriate in my comments about entrepreneurship helping minorities. I'm like, but I'm one of them, right? I mean, and you're basically saying that the only way that we can actually achieve success is not by ourselves, but actually through government intervention. I think that's very insulting.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that one of the cultural assumptions they have to push back on here is that a lot of these big government programs are helping the little guy and not the big guy, not big business. One of the things that we've talked about for pretty much as long as we've been around here at the Competitive Enterprise Institute is that a lot of regulation doesn't actually discipline business. A lot of regulation is what they call rent sinking or cronyism, or it's put in place with essentially the connivance of a lot of the big incumbent firms in ways that prop them up and make it harder for the little guy to compete with them. So the reality for a lot of people, for a lot of Americans, is actually the opposite of what they sort of assume, is that most regulation is to discipline the big guys and help them, whereas it actually keeps the little guy from ever competing with the established players.
Oh yeah, I mean, thank goodness that folks like yourselves really are pushing that narrative out there, because what this belief of that, government is actually there and regulations are there to actually protect the small guy, it is such a falsehood. It's so wrong in terms of what it actually does. I mean, look, case in point, Dodd-Frank, right? Dodd-Frank was there to protect the little guy, right? Well, guess what ended up happening? 1,800 community banks went out of business because they couldn't afford the expense of the regulations, right? Of being able to keep up with all the reporting that needed to take place, right? And so again, 1,800 community banks. Well, guess where those community banks were? In communities where minorities actually were a bigger part. So the very communities, right, and people that supposedly the Democrats and progressives were trying to protect, right, we're actually being hurt. And so now, for example, access to capital is extremely hard for small business. It's one of the things actually we put out at the end of last year, alongside with Newt Gingrich, the American Small Business Prosperity Plan. It's an 8-point plan. I encourage people to go to our website to look at that. But that's one of the 8 points, is we got to improve access to capital for our small businesses. Right now, it's very, very difficult to do that. And so fintech, we know, is one of the answers. But back to your point, the regulatory environment is there not to protect the little guy, right, but to keep them out of competition of the big guy. Look, be very, very worried and nervous when you have Amazon and Facebook, right, pushing for more regulations in their industry. That should make you very, very afraid.
Right. Now, when it comes to defending a free economy, we definitely have some cultural challenges like we talked about, but I think we might have some advantages too. If you look, for example, at shows like Shark Tank, or even the show Undercover Boss, where CEOs learn more about their frontline employees, that seems like there's a pretty positive view of the business world. And there's a lot of places online, whether it's the Wall Street bets kids on Reddit who are big into stock investing and writing the trends. There seems to be, while there are the socialist college students out there, there are definitely a subset of young people who are all about hustling and working and building the future. Do you think we're sometimes too pessimistic about how hostile America culture is to entrepreneurialism?
I'll also point out, though, that there's the Jetsons and the Flintstones. Remember, I'm kind of dating myself here, but there was the big old capitalist bosses in both of those shows, right? In both of those cartoons, right? So it's actually started from long time ago, where we actually look bad and frown upon these capitalists, right? That are such bad people. And so, while there is Shark Tank, and I love, Shark Tank and what it represents, what we actually probably need to do is we need to take those Shark Tank models and do something within the communities, right, that encourage entrepreneurialism. It's no longer really taught in high schools. We know that, right? So there's a way that workshops or something, but it's going to require small business owners to actually speak out, speak up, to be more active in their community, not just necessarily fund the little leagues and the soccer teams and stuff like that, which are desperately needed, right? Without them, by the way, we wouldn't have a community, we wouldn't have a country, right? Because they fund all those kind of community programs. But I would encourage small businesses to get out there, right, and start up some kind of a workshop in your community, where you encourage high school kids, for example, to maybe follow a passion, help fund them, maybe $1,000. I mean, a lot of these ideas probably don't require a lot, but it's just the idea of encouraging from a very young age, that idea that, hey, you know what, if you have an idea, go for it, right? And we're going to help you by mentoring you, by putting our arms around you and saying, hey, you know what, you can do it.
That's excellent. Here in this is just one kind of anecdotal example, but here in Washington, D.C., in my neighborhood in the northwest part of the city, just this summer, I stumbled upon one of the most heartwarming events I've been to, which is a little kid entrepreneur fair, where all of these kids between the ages of about 10 and 16 were all selling products they had made, and little micro businesses they had started, which I think is a great example of the kind of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to tell you that, years ago, when we were actually fighting some of the regulations that were coming out of the National Labor Relations Board, I actually ran across a story of a little girl who was running a lemonade stand right outside of her house, and she got shut down by the city, right? Because she didn't have a business license and she didn't have, a health license. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, let's be serious. It's a lemonade stand, right? I mean, we need to do more for our kids, at all levels. And like you said, I mean, it's great. Let's start at the elementary schools, but encouraging kids, right, to do that. I mean, there's no more paper routes, right? Because we don't have really papers in this country anymore. We're also using social media. But let's do things that encourage people to hard work, right? That work ethic encourages them to actually in later days work even harder and really achieve something, like Bernie Marcus did when he was, he grew up in the tenements, who started Home Depot, the tenements in New Jersey. And look, he had an idea at 49, he might have gotten fired from his job, but at 52, he started Home Depot. So we need to start that early on.
Well, I agree. And I would like to encourage everyone to follow your work at Job Creators Network and get a copy of the book. We'll link to it in our show notes. Thanks
Thank
for
you
being
so
with us.
much. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time and opportunity.